I'm talking with Andrea Modica, and we're talking in particular about two titles that have been published by Lartier. Is that how you pronounce it? Um, yeah. Um, Two titles are "As We Wait," and the other title is January 1st. And I wanted to start this discussion just by a kind of a reminiscence. I remember the first time Andrea and I met, and that was actually when she was living in Colorado, and I'd actually flown out to see her specifically because of some pictures of hers that I'd seen, and I was struck by the mood of the pictures. I was really struck by um, the thoughtfulness of the pictures, and also I was struck by how much they dealt with actual things, with things of the body, challenges that in a way that we all face, existential challenges. And I really wanted the chance to talk to her, so I flew out there, and we spent a couple of days. I recall very intense days, really looking at work, talking about work, and that's always stuck with me as a kind of preamble to especially to As We Wait, which as someone who's followed her work for a couple of decades at least, it is in a way what I've been waiting for. And Andrea, I wonder if you talk a little bit. This is a kind of a retrospective, but it isn't. And I wonder if you talk a little bit about how As We Wait came together. Tell us a little bit about that.
Great. Well, Lyle, I want to say I have such fond memories of that first visit. It was really great. So Larry Fink contacted me. He had published with Latiere, and they do a series of works where a photographer, curator, director, somebody will curate the work of somebody else for a book. And Larry asked me if he could curate my work. So, of course, I was thrilled. I adore Larry and his work. And I sent him these very organized folders of probably, I don't know, at least 15 years of work that hadn't not been published.
And this was specifically to choose work out of material that had not shown up in books like Treadwell, for example, or Fountain, or
For me, it was unpublished work.
okay.
That was my rule, and
Mhm.
I had lots of it. So I gave him all these tidy little folders of all these, in my mind, very clearly delineated projects, and I thought he would pick one, and that would be the book. But instead, it was as if he had taken all those folders and threw them in the air and just randomly picked images from each folder. I didn't understand at all his system, but I trust him completely. So I said, well, okay, just do it. So he curated, he sequenced, and he wrote about the all of these pictures. I think there's 40 something pictures in the book, and from probably a dozen, maybe 15 different bodies of work. So there's a picture, for instance, of my ex-husband. There's pictures of ex-boyfriends, and there's pictures of my current partner. Larry thought they were all the same guy. I mean, for him, like in my mind, I'm like, ex-husband and current boyfriend, they would never go in the same book.
I must say, as I was looking through the book, I was thinking to myself, who are these guys?
As I said, a lot of years of work, and so he just put together, in a sense, his own story,
Right.
and I love that because it becomes it was, I mean, a collaboration is an understatement. And I am somebody who will hand my work over to somebody who is good at their job, like putting up a show. I'm
Hmm.
not that
Right.
photographer who's going to be at the gallery saying these need to be together or these need to be together. I like
Mhm.
to show up at the opening and see what's been
What
done.
they've done. Yeah.
I like to see my work through somebody else's eyes. and I don't think that'll ever end. So this was, a lesson about my work, and it also freed me at this stage in my life, my career, decades into photographing, to stop thinking about categories and to
Hmm.
understand that these different groups of work are actually made by the same person. I started to be able to see objectively connections between the different bodies of work. That's an incredible gift, right?
Yeah, no, and I was struck by that. I think that that's why, um, this idea of having someone else uh, edit your work, I suppose. See, it's a little different. A show is something that passes, but
Yeah.
when it's in a book, like you say, it's a story, and that story has a kind of permanence. And 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 on the one hand, I was struck by the fact that I know that this is somebody else's story. That this is Larry Fink's story about you. On the other hand, I also know that it's you because every one of the pictures in here, I've often talked to my students about this, every one of the pictures in the book is made by the same person. It's very obviously the same person. It's just a very different walkthrough of themes and ideas that, in a sense, represent you. Um, and was there any back and forth in that? Did you have input in the sense that you could talk to him and say, "Hey, don't you think you ought to put this picture in, or why don't you move this around?" Or was it really, you take over? It's your story.
I think I may have added a picture. I certainly didn't take anything out.
Hmm.
So the short answer would be not really.
No. Well, were there surprises for you about the photographer that emerges in this book?
Yeah, I mean, shocking surprises. I mean, I'm so, as we all are, in my head about the things that I make. I remember what I was feeling when I made those pictures. The first picture in the book is my
Right.
now, 20-year ago husband. The first picture. Would I make a book which ends with him? So that
And it's a remarkable picture, right?
it,
It's a wonderful picture.
and in fact, he did not like being photographed, so I really feel like that photograph is a gift from him. I mean, I'm so happy to have it. Um, but anyway, so yes, I saw my work as if I hadn't seen it before.
Well, let me ask you about some of the thematic ideas that emerge. And again, one of the reasons why I appreciate what Larry did so much is that it did crystallize for me a lot of the things that I've been thinking about your work for, again, for 20 years. And it really is, it's kind of wonderful to see somebody really kind of put their finger on things. I do think that there are things that are obviously not there that I would have loved to see, but but it would be a different kind of book. It would be much more like a true retrospective, if you know what I mean, right? That would be the big thing where you go through everything. And but this isn't that. And one of the things that is really struck me, and it starts at the opening image, that the one of your ex, and it's a picture that is in a pool. It's in a swimming pool, and there's an older man at one end, and then your ex from behind, where you see his torso in the water, and people are looking at each other. And one of the themes that comes up so much in Larry's selection is something that's been on my mind about your work always, and that is this idea of contemplating, that is, or looking. That is, on the cover of the book, there's a picture of a child who's looking at a dead bird. You don't see their eyes, but you really clearly see what the relationship is. So there are all these encounters. They are kind of engagements. Sometimes the person who's being looked at is not there, you can't see them. Sometimes you really can. Sometimes a person is looking off at something else. And that's for me, that's a powerful theme for a photographer to pursue. Always, always looking, people thinking about what they're looking at. I'm just wondering if you might want to comment on that as a preoccupation of yours when you're dealing with situations.
Well, that's a lot. Thank you for that assessment. I love that. We were talking before we started recording about influences who have been the most influential photographers. So the history of photography and artists came up, and she famously talked about staring and being told all your life, being brought up not to stare, and the camera does definitely give you a certain permission to stare and to dissect and to be intimate with and to have a relationship with the world that does not exist without the camera, at least for me. So, the camera is photographing is not first and foremost about making a good picture, although that's like a heroin high
Mhm.
addiction. But it's first and foremost about being able to spend time very intimately with things that generally I there's something that I'm not getting.
Something you don't understand, something that by
There's
kind
some,
of by being there and looking, something will emerge.
sometimes it's just about spending the time.
Mhm. Yeah, again, it goes back to the title, As We Wait. I mean, what are we waiting for? We're waiting for the good picture. We're waiting to understand something about where we are, and we're waiting obviously for an endpoint that regardless of how fast we're moving or how slowly we're moving, we will get there nonetheless. So there's all these different forms of waiting. And and I think that from my perspective, it relates to the pictures so much because they're incredibly attentive pictures. Like you are attending, you are being attentive to things that are really, really hard to put into words. Um, and and that to me is sort of where the strength of the photographs emerges. And again, that's something I talk to my students about a lot. Said that attentiveness is not something that you can put into words, but you can learn how to do it. You can learn how to be attentive. And I feel like you have become more attentive. I wonder if you would want to talk about that a little
Off the cuff, I was just not something I've really thought much about.
bit. I mean, in a sense, it has to do with sort of I suppose with the kinds of pictures you're taking in a way. Some of your earlier work, I felt like it you would set up situations or you would find a place to work like Treadwell, for example, where there was really a lot of stuff there for you. And it's not that there was easy work because I think it's great work, but over time, I think the pictures have become more about you looking and less about the subject per se, even though the subjects are obviously important.
I
Uh,
love what you're saying. That's really interesting because Barbara was one of 14 children. There were 21 people living in the house, and my initial draw was that these 21 people were like, yeah, okay, you can do this. So, of course, it turned into something else. But you're right. I mean, now I'm, for example, photographing my partner of 14 years,
yeah, I think that's a perfect example. Yeah.
extensively. It's like one person as opposed to 21. And Barbara and her family moved a couple dozen, maybe 30 times in the
Mhm.
50 years that I photographed them. So my backdrop changed.
Right.
And
That's true. And
so
it
that,
was no longer Treadwell as such. It was Barbara's project, right?
yeah, yes, I
That
would,
collaboration.
I would say absolutely. So in fact,
So
even that project got narrower.
narrow and narrow.
Last picture,
Right.
she was, very sick in bed. It was just that one room, which didn't even have windows. So the last year were, and she wasn't moving much. So in fact, yeah, it got smaller and smaller, which of course, in some weird way, makes it get bigger and bigger.
I had one other question, and it's about a particular picture in the. I have many more questions, but I have one particular question about a photograph in the book, and it was one that is just absolutely striking, and it's the picture of the horse. There's a picture of a horse behind what appears to be some sort of glass partition. It could be plastic as well. It's translucent, and it appears that the horse is in a shower, perhaps. And
Oh,
I'm not sure if that's true.
that
Uh, so
there.
I know that's part of a series that you've been working on. I, it just absolutely jumped out at me as a kind of unprecedented image. It's so strange and yet and mysterious, but it's so riveting. I wonder if you talk a little bit about that project or about how that photograph came to be.
Well, that is going to be the cover of the next book, which is work done at a horse hospital in a horse clinic outside of Bologna in
Mhm.
Italy. And the horse is being walked from his place where he was asleep after his operation, which is where I was typically photographing the horses. And the person walking him, of course, held him for my 8x10 camera, for
Right.
a couple minutes. And it's just a plastic wall.
Mhm.
It's kind of quite like a shower curtain, actually, separating those two sections of the
Yeah,
thing.
it's like a shower curtain, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's something about horse in the shower that just it's really so surprising. It's just kind of a surrealist idea.
I'm
Um,
just glad
but
you picked out, pretty much one of the newest pictures in the book, which
well,
is
I'm interested in how you came to be attracted to that as a subject. I mean, there's lots of different kinds of bodies in your work, and horses are very, very powerful as physical beings. And I wonder if that was part of the attraction.
there's a horse picture in Treadwell. I don't know if you know.
Yes, that's right. I remember that.
This is from a horse farm. I have no knowledge of or passion for horses. I mean, I respect them, so it wasn't about that. But I have a friend who is a surgeon
Mhm.
um, at a horse. He owns a horse hospital, and he's an artist, and he's a terrific artist and an art collector. So Francesco and I were having dinner at his house, and do you want to tour my studio? The studio is upstairs from the operating theater. Uh,
Wow.
how great is that? So I'm like, well, the artwork's good, but what's going on down here? And so I saw these boxes, these recovery boxes, but I'm really going off a little bit here. But I wanted a piece of that. Again, I was curious about what that looked like. Like, how do you move a horse that's sleeping? And
Right.
that's a pretty amazing thing, actually. That's an event. And there are cranes and pulleys and it's kind of incredible. So I started photographing there. Well, I photographed there for the better part of 8 years. I made some films. And as I said, it's going to be my next book. But it really was about, in the end, definitely finding some feeling at home with the vulnerability of these magnificent, powerful, often very expensive horses, very valuable horses,
Right. Right.
undergoing very expensive procedures.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so it was also that piece of it, the money part, that was fascinating to me. The fact that this was a business and they were these magnificent beasts, um, and I saw things happen like oh my goodness, like a horse would walk in limping in one way, and the chart says this is the leg that has to be operated on. The chart coming from the vet, and the surgeon saying, but he's walking as if it's the other leg. They redo the X-ray. The vet had sent over the wrong leg to be operated
Oh
on. So
God.
this is
Yeah.
stuff these are the nightmares that we hear humans go through, and I mean,
Absolutely.
and so there was something about that, that vulnerability that was kind of a stand-in for our own experience and our own fears.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely a project that is full of my worst nightmares, I have to say.
And I think that comes through in the pictures as well. That connection between the human and the animal is just so absolutely intense. And I think that's one of the things that in many ways it drives that project forward. And it gives it, I think, the kind of power that is really quite striking. Um, I wonder if we could shift gears for a minute. I wanted to ask you some questions about January 1st, which is a remarkable book. I haven't seen anything like it. Um, and it's one of those projects or one of those works that um, I was just having a conversation, a long conversation the other day with students in my graduate class. We're talking about portrait making, and I said that there are still mysteries to be experienced in photographic portraiture. The things that lie there that are just on the surface that seem so obvious until we look at the pictures a little more carefully. And I wanted them to look at January 1st, and there are a number of other photographers, but not many, where the surface is the depth. And this is a remarkable project. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how the project actually took shape. You say I think in your little afterword, which I think is hilarious, you say this was a 10-day project that took 10 years. So I wonder if you'd tell us about how this came to be.
Well, I moved to Philadelphia, and Lyle, I know it's a city you know very well, but I didn't. I didn't know what a mummer was, and so every January 1st, there is a mummer parade, and men. I'm really going to just condense this. Dress in women's clothes. The wenches, this particular faction, dress.
Because there's lots of people who participate in the Mummers Parade,
But
right?
this book, January 1, is specifically the wenches.
Uh-huh.
And so they're not necessarily involved with the choreography and the themes and the really high end production quality of the parade itself, but they love the party. And many generations in their family, all male, have passed down sometimes the dresses, and it is a neighborhood which is not unlike the neighborhood I grew up in Brooklyn. So I felt very attracted to that.
So it's very working class,
Yeah, and also still quite tied to its ethnicity.
right?
I go like this because now we're talking about great grandparents, not
Right. And
grandparents.
this is South Philadelphia, right?
South Philly,
Okay.
exactly. So I was feeling at once at home. If this is going to start sounding like a theme, it is, I guess. At once at home, and at once completely left out. And I was left out because I was female, and left out because I was not from South Philly. And so I tend to want to scratch the surface of things I don't quite understand that are at once very appealing and slightly repellent. So um, and sometimes very repellent. But I went there one year with my 8x10 camera. There is this period where it's not quite dark out because, of course, I use only natural light. And there is this parade going on. And I would just go into the parade with the big camera and pull people off to the side and make portraits. And why? The wedges are actually have been a source of controversy in they're purportedly straight men dressing like women. Okay, so you just do the math. I mean, there's all kinds of levels of confusion with the whole subject, which I found completely interesting. And yes, sometimes slightly repellent. So completely attractive.
Sometimes very vulnerable as well, right? Just weirdly vulnerable.
Because what are they but, if not horses after their operation? I mean, they are as vulnerable as the rest of us. They're just people, right? But I did this project for 10 years. I started in the Obama years, ended a couple years ago, and there was a noteworthy switch that
Mhm.
happened the January that Trump was going to be inaugurated. And the what is illegal, blackface, started showing up more.
Oh, that is a very, very important
All
thing to note, it seems to
Yeah,
me.
all the blackface pictures, of course, of which there were, I think, three,
Uh-huh. Right.
all came after the inauguration. In fact, most of them that month. and that was the, famous pussy grabbing month, and
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
stuff, all that stuff was coming out, and there was this absolute unleashing of I can do whatever I want, and I felt it as a photographer. For example, I had a man who was about my age tell his son in his 20s what he wanted to do to me while I was under the dark cloth photographing him.
Really?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it was that was the year I almost gave up, but I didn't. I kept going back. And then I finally, well, this year put an end to it because
Right.
the pandemic canceled the parade. Uh, but I got what I needed. I got what I personally needed to see, which was that there are lovely, beautiful, complex men involved with this process, and that there are some beasts. There are both.
Right.
And uh, I'd like to think that you can't tell who's who in my pictures. And everybody's just very, very, very kind of available. I don't know why. I did get a little bit of crap for not being from the neighborhood from women, actually.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because women are except there's one, is there not one example of a daughter who's in these
Oh,
pictures? Or is that a son?
yeah, the little boy
Ah, okay.
inside.
Who's also dressed up,
Of
right?
course, because he's wearing a dress. And his
Yes.
father has a target tattoo on his shaven head. Kindest guy. He's a graphic designer, just a beautiful man, lovely family, lovely wife, and didn't, absolutely no, but he, in that picture, he is so tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact,
And
he's called Motorcycle Bob. That's his
ah, but again, we are confronted, and this is what I love about this book. But you've been doing this for Andrea for over 30 years. I mean, the baseball pictures were very much like this in a certain way, which is, you think you know what you're looking at, and I'm going to show you that you don't know what you're looking at. What you're going to see is something you're kind of projecting on, but that's not what I'm showing you. I'm showing you something that's harder to read, that we can't it's not so easy to project into. And it's especially true when you have these men dressed as women, but they could have their baseball uniforms on, right? It could be Jorge Posada in his catcher's outfit sitting on a bench. And I remember that picture from the minor league series way back in the day from spring training. And there's something like that here where you know you have to negotiate between appearances and something else. And was that your intention going in? I'm going to show the audience something that they're going to have to deal with and not really know how to react. Is that part of what you were thinking, or was it something else?
no, 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 no. I don't ever think about this. No offense. I never think about the audience.
Mhm.
Should I? I'd probably be
No, I mean, no.
a famous photographer if I did. But I'm really in it for the most selfish reasons. I mean, I moved there. This thing is going on. I'm like, that seems really screwed up. So I want to go right in the middle of it because it's my new town and I want to know what's going on. Why are these guys dressing like women? Why am I reading in the paper that, you know, there's all this controversy? I mean, you can look it up. I'm not going to go into listing it. And then of course, I look. There's this other piece of the puzzle that you're not mentioning, which is that not only am I looking intently at these groups, like the baseball
Right,
players, think of the spiritual cousins of this work,
right.
absolutely. Um, but they're looking at me. So
Yes.
the fact that I was with the baseball players, not quite old enough to be a parent, not quite young enough to be a girlfriend, didn't know anything about baseball, didn't care anything about baseball. I didn't know why I was there, except that there were these guys that I needed to understand because I was attracted and repelled by them. Absolutely
Hmm.
parallel to this. But I was 30 years younger, and now as an older woman, my advantage is being an older woman. My advantage then was being, of course, a younger woman.
Right.
I'm a better photographer, but I also, um, it's just whatever it is that they're reacting to, I find endlessly interesting. So if
But
they,
but you made some really interesting decisions too about how to frame them. Because this is not um, this is not a typological book that is, you know, turn to the right, stand face forward, and everybody gets the same treatment.
Lyle,
Because
do you
there are
have
some
a book in front
kind
of
of middle distance ones, a couple of close-ups that are, basically from the upper torso up. There are a lot of different approaches, and I'm just thinking about how you made those decisions as well.
I'm wondering if you should hold one picture up.
Yeah.
Because
Well, I'll hold up one.
it just
I'm going
looks,
to hold this up
it
because
just,
I love this picture. This is an astonishing portrait.
oh,
Okay.
yeah,
Where, this is a person who it seems to me, doesn't really know why he's there and what you're doing. But you've kind of caught him between something. That's
there,
one example.
but
Right?
remember what I just said about the baseball players, that I wasn't quite this, I wasn't quite that? Yes, what I'm doing is confusing to me, so it's confusing to whoever I photograph. That is for sure.
Mhm.
And baseball players, that's part of the what's and these pictures part of what's so complicated about what they present, because they don't quite know, are they being glorified? Are they, it's this big camera. Oh, yes. So sweet.
I mean, look, we laugh, but these are astonishing
He's
pictures.
so
They
sweet,
really are.
that guy. But there's another thing worth mentioning,
Yeah.
Lyle, which is something but the audience probably maybe they'll guess, is that there's a tremendous amount of alcohol involved with
Yes. And
January 1.
you kind of get a hint of that, but you're right. You don't actually see that directly. But yes,
There
a
are
lot of drinking
some
going on.
beer cans either in a hand or on the ground. Um, but and occasionally, like that picture, the first one you put up with the
Yeah.
father, I part of his glazed look is that. So
I
again,
was wondering about that. Then you have another one. It comes up later, like this one, which is an astonishing picture as well.
which of course that little boy's not drunk.
No, of course not. And yet, it's a strange expression that we're invited to contemplate. Him looking at you as a kind of question,
Well,
and you looking at him.
I'll say many of these men are pulled out of the bar, right? So
Yeah.
that boy was taken from his parents at the bar for that picture.
Uh-huh. So he's going, what am I doing here
I
again?
remember that exactly. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a big party day in Philly, which is part of the appeal, right? I mean, it's fun.
Sure,
And as a
sure.
newcomer, you want to be invited to the party. You want to be part of the party. Uh,
Well, and and it's such an odd situation because there you are, the party's going on right next door, and you've got this big 8x10 camera, and it's like you got to kind of pull them in out of whatever it is they're doing, and then boom, shoot them, and off they go. And
yeah.
did they get a chance to see this work? Did
Oh,
they react to it?
wow, that I don't know. But from the first of all, I think it might be worth. I want to answer that question. So if I don't, ask me again. But I do want to say that it might be worth mentioning for whoever might actually listen to this, that the pictures all are made with a large format 8x10 camera. So
Right. That's obviously important.
my negatives are 8 by 10 inches, and my camera is gigantic. It's as big as I am. So there's no, and we're talking about, the horses as we wait, baseball, all of it. And so this let's say unfolding or unleashing of information and behavior happens in part because there is this enormous camera involved. So the part of the meaning of the picture is formed by that camera. So just worth mentioning that people
Can
are,
you explain that a little more? It unfolds not only in the detail of the picture,
So,
obviously, because
so
the negative is going to be a very large negative. But is it the way people relate to an 8x10 camera?
totally is. So that picture, can you hold up the picture where Motorcycle Bob is holding his little boy in his arm?
Yeah, hang on. I have to find it. It's just going to take me a
Okay.
minute to find it.
So I'll start telling you
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I fully intended to photograph that little boy alone because he was precious. And there was Motorcycle Bob kind of on the side, encouraging to stay still. Lyle, this was a January 1st that was particularly cold. My shutter froze. That had never happened before. So this little boy was standing, trying to stand still, struggling. And so his dad stepped in and put his arm around him. This was as a result of the fact that the kid was trying to stay still in 3-degree weather.
Right. I
That
have a picture of him by himself. No, I don't actually.
no, 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 it's
It's just going to take me a
it's not
minute to
exactly a book.
find it.
I'd love for you to show the audience the actual book because it's designed like with. Can you hold up the book on an angle? Like,
Yeah, I can also do it like that too.
but also the can you open up any page and just show them a cross section because it was printed to lie flat, right? So if you can go like, show us flat, the pages don't go like that. So when I say it's not a flipping book, it's the pages are actually two sheets of paper glued together.
Right.
So it was designed to look like a box of prints and to feel like a box of prints. It's
And
quite
it does. It does.
really
It absolutely
and then
feels that way.
the cover, which you just held up, references a negative. So we made the book. Diana Picardi designed the book to reference the negative and the contact print, um, kind of part of my work um,
Yeah.
by printing them one to one. Oh, took me.
Yes. Printing them one to one. That's exactly right. So what you see is what you get.
So looking for a photograph through there, you're not exactly flipping through the book. That's what's making me laugh. But I would love.
There's the picture we were talking about before, right?
Yeah, and you thought this was a girl, did you?
I did. I couldn't tell. I literally couldn't tell.
Yeah. So all of course 8x10, kind of there's snow on the ground. You could see, and then this miracle of this little flap of Bob's dress covering one eye of his child. I mean, those
Yeah.
kinds of gifts from the photo gods, you can't. I guess if you have paint and a canvas, you can do it, but it's really hard to plan for stuff like that when it was super windy and the kid was literally shaking. So, Lyle, that's a really good example of a photograph that was really a collaboration. Like I started out with this idea that I want this thing. I want this
Right.
little boy, this tiny boy dressed as a girl in my picture. This little boy who kind of looks like a girl because he's so beautiful. And so, I mean, he's little, he's teeny. And then, of course, all these things happen. So this opportunity presented itself to me as a result of the fact that it was a gigantic camera which requires that the subject stay still while I set up the picture and then take the picture. So it might just take a few minutes if I'm good, if I'm on. It won't I won't torture them for too long, but that's a long time to ask somebody to remove somebody from a bar where people are screaming and dancing and or remove them from a parade. That's a
Yeah, absolutely.
long
Where
time.
they're moving, right?
Yeah, so they're being really no, but the point is I'm removing them from something which is frenetic. They are
Right.
they are engaged in something which is very high energy and completely unleashed. It's a wild party and they're staying still for even a couple
Right.
minutes. Of
And
course,
that changes the game
that's
completely.
the point.
Completely.
That's the
Yeah,
point.
that's the point. That's
So
the
the
point. Well,
pictures
did
are
they have a chance to see these pictures after they were finished?
thank you for reminding me that question. So I just very, very early on, I've been doing this for, as you say, decades, probably 40 years. And I have always given prints to people who will do what I just said. So, I mean, first of all, I need permission to use the pictures, right? So
Mhm.
they sign a release, and on that release is a mailing, a physical mailing address. And within a month, maybe two, they get a print. So there, I hear nothing. The baseball players, on the other hand, because I was, you know, I was giving them prints while I was still shooting. So that then informed the
Mhm.
pictures, as you can imagine.
Yes, I can yeah, I can well imagine.
So if somebody was, and this happened with the mummers, although they had to wait, they had to remember from a year ago as opposed
Right,
to yesterday or last week. Like, oh, she's okay, she'll give you
right.
a print, she does great work, and then like there's the guy who wants to take care of you, and he's like, he'll go in the bar and start pulling people out for you.
Ah, that's interesting too.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. As I said, I've met some really wonderful people.
But did they was the work exhibited so that people could come and see it kind of as a body of work? Was that ever shown in Philly, for example?
Oh gosh, no, no. But we had a launch of the book at the Print
Mhm.
Center, and a few of them came, and it was lovely. It was fantastic.
That must have been very interesting actually to
Well,
see, that mixing of worlds, so to speak.
Lyle, that is like any opening of any show. Oh my God, like it's so odd to have your cousin there with the critic, with the snoot satirist, and oh,
Right, exactly.
head spinning.
With Cowboy Bob and,
So it's head spinning. I mean, it's sort of like being at your funeral. I feel a little bit, like, oh, I'm here, but I'm not really. And they're all here, and they're interacting, and I'm sort of the subject of this, but not really. Like a
well,
funeral, right? I mean,
yeah. No, for sure. It is yeah,
like they're having their own party now, and that's great. So I'm a
right.
catalyst for bringing them together and for bringing these disparate groups together. It's super fun.
Yeah.
It's super fun, and of course, it's a blast because the students are involved,
Yeah.
and so that, I mean, I don't need to tell you, how great that is.
Yeah, and it's very eye-opening for them to see what these realities are like. I did want to ask you a couple of maybe geeky questions, but they're actually more important than that. Um, can we talk about your own darkroom work and where that is these days? Obviously we've moved into a digital universe where, it's just kind of standard operating procedure that everything is going to kind of flow through that. Can you talk about making your own prints about darkroom work? Where do you stand on that today? You feel like that's still absolutely essential to your work? You're a brilliant printer. Okay, your platinum prints are, they're as good as it gets. And they're also very personal in that regard. But I'm just wondering how you see it now.
Well,
That aspect of your practice.
well, first of all, thank you for that compliment. Thank you. I print because I like to print. If I had learned photography sitting on my behind at a computer, I'd do something else for a living. It's that simple. I mean, I use a big camera. It's a very physical activity. It's like, punching clay. It's, my hands are in it. Everything's come with me these 40 years. If it's a bad back, or, whatever it is, if I mean, it is my instrument. It's like such an extension of me, that camera. And then you have these film holders that are filled with this stuff that you collected, and you process the film, and then it has to dry, and then of course you're looking at it when it's dripping with chemistry, making decisions and cursing yourself and dancing a dance, and then it dries and you make proofs, and then your wall looks, something like that. And you
Exactly.
decide, I'm going to live with this for, some time, and decide if anything is, worthy of being printed in platinum. And then of course you print in platinum and then have an idea if it's any good. So there's all these stages. Of course, Lyle, I have done really a lot of assignment work, which is like that. But
Right.
with the big camera, I still shoot with the big camera, but I don't have the luxury of that. But that to me is the process of like gessoing a canvas, stretching a canvas, gessoing, and then
Yes, exactly.
that this is just how I learned. It's what I fell in love with. It's what I fell in love with. It's that simple. There is no argument for using a big camera anymore. It's expensive. It's cost. It is bad for you. Platinum is heavy metal. I like to get up in the morning and put on my little, that is part of my like outfit. That's what I do for a living. I do that. And I am really happy to have that job. And if I had to sit at a computer, I would, I think, just, poke a fork in my eye. And my students, of course, learn, most of them, not all of them, but their first experience in photography is at a computer and they fell in love with that. And
That's interesting. Yeah.
that's what they love. And, I'm just confident I would be, of course, I went to school for painting and then became
Ah,
a s-
that makes perfect
and
sense,
then
right?
I dropped that for metal welding. I mean, I loved metal welding. And then I took a photography class because I thought it'd be easy, just like most people do. And I went straight to the 8 by 10 after one semester. So the
Wow.
is because it was the closest thing to melding to welding metal in that dark room. Um, and the handmade print, of course. So there is really no argument. Of course, really, we share most of the stuff online anyway. There's no argument.
Yeah, it all gets mediated that way at the end of the day for sure. But this is to me, this is a fundamental problem, certainly as a critic, but somebody who cares about pictures as well, is that, you know, they become images. That's not what we're dealing with here.
Li-
It's something.
I have to tell you something funny though, because you're going to get this. You will get this, but my students don't understand this. When I was a young photographer, I used to say, I mean, there are groups of people who make platinum prints who like sit around holding hands and oming over the beauty of platinum print. I was never that.
Absolutely right.
I was
They're,
never
they're,
that
yeah,
person.
they're total geeks. I
I
get it,
was
right?
never, and yet my prints are good. So it's really important to me that they are like amazing, but I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to convince anybody about it. That's not the end all to me.
It's a means to an end,
It's
obviously.
one of these steps.
Right.
And so I used to say very early on, if to anybody would listen, my pictures have to be as good in newsprint. It was newsprint. That was the like, and now, of course, they have to look as good on this thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and if they don't, then something is. Then I'm depending on that camera and that film and that platinum print. I never want to depend on that for an image. It's got to live.
I understand that, but I remember what something Sally Mance said to me once, and that was that, we live in a time in which the images that we see never come to ground. They never become things. And until they become things, you can't really know what they are. And I feel that so much is that's so true of your work. Yes, it's very powerful if you see it, on the screen, but it is nothing like actually having the prints, and seeing them close up, especially, the platinum prints you cannot reproduce. I'm sorry. You just can't.
I so love that you're saying that, but I of course
However, that said,
do
I
it.
have to say that January 1st comes pretty close.
Well, that's what I want to say. If we're gonna bring this home in any way,
Yeah.
the book is its own animal and
Yes.
is not that book but all books, but now that book we could say is
Mhm.
its own rendition of this work, just like Larry's.
Exactly. It's obviously a different thing, but it needs to have a kind of genetic relationship to the photos themselves. And both of these books do that, which I think is, man, that's not easy. That
I
is not easy.
I agree, and of course Latiere does a beautiful job printing and designing, and they're the most lovely people to work with. The experience has just been, incredible, and they make beautiful books. I mean, it's
Yeah. No,
obvious.
absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
but yeah, I think the book is probably where it's where the pictures live permanently, isn't it?
That's correct. That's correct. It is where they live. And so their house has to be a really good one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I mean, I think that's a really nice place for us to conclude for now. And I'm sure our conversation will continue, but this is a good place for us to stop here.
Well, Lyle, thank you so much.
No, Andrea, it's always my pleasure. And I can't wait for this to show up in at the book fair.
Thank you, Lyle.
I'll see you soon.